You keep fixing the symptom, the fatigue, the overthinking, the lack of motivation. You fix it with a new habit, a better diet, more books, more plans, more movement. You keep patching holes. But what if I told you the hole is inside you, not around you? What if all your effort, all your self-improvement, all your discipline is just another distraction? Another performance that protects you from the one thing you fear most, feeling. You don't need another tactic. You don't need another motivational video. You need to feel, and that's terrifying. Because feeling forces you to confront what you've buried, what you've denied, what you've armored over with logic, planning, and performance. Pain you swallowed as a child. Grief you numbed because no one gave you permission to cry. Shame you carried because someone made you believe it was yours to hold. Anger you never expressed because nice people don't get angry, do they? But that pain didn't disappear. It metastasized into perfectionism, into anxiety, into emotional distance, into hyperproductivity. You wake up every morning thinking you're just tired or burned out, but you're not. You're emotionally starving. You've been feeding the brain while starving the soul. You treat your symptoms like enemies when they're actually messengers. The panic, the procrastination, the numbness, they're not random. They're the language of your unprocessed emotions. And every time you ignore them, every time you distract yourself with discipline instead of dialogue, you widen the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. But here's the truth most people never hear. There is no breakthrough without breakdown, and there is no healing without feeling. You're not broken because you feel too much. You're broken because you've been trained not to feel at all. The Stoics knew this. They weren't emotionless. They were emotionally trained. They didn't suppress emotion. They mastered it. Marcus Aurelius didn't write about ignoring grief. He wrote about facing it with clarity. Epictetus didn't teach us to avoid fear. He taught us to strip it of illusion. You think your suffering makes you weak, but suffering is how the soul wakes up. You think discipline is suppression, but real discipline is the ability to sit in stillness and not flinch. Psychology agrees. The mind doesn't suffer from weakness. It suffers from disconnection, the inability to feel fully. Trauma doesn't always look like drama. It often looks like avoidance. Avoidance of emotion, of silence, of presence. That's why you crave noise. That's why you obsess over self-help while skipping the part where you sit quietly with yourself. Because when you sit quietly, the truth shows up, and it doesn't always smile. But here's the shift. The emotions you fear are not here to break you. They're here to reintroduce you to yourself. The self you abandoned to stay likable. The self you buried to stay productive. The self you forgot because you were too busy trying to be strong. Strength isn't resistance. It's surrender to truth. And that truth hurts at first, but it also liberates. Carl Jung said, "What you resist not only persists but grows in size." That's not poetry. That's neuroscience. When you suppress an emotion, it doesn't go away. It hides in the nervous system. It distorts your reactions. It shapes your relationships. It becomes the script you live by without knowing you're reading from a page you didn't write. So you fix the symptom again. You build new routines. You read more philosophy. You wake up at 5 a.m., hit the gym, check the boxes, and you still feel empty. Why? Because you're living from your surface self, the outer character that looks impressive but feels hollow. You've learned to fix, but you haven't learned to feel, and you're not alone. The modern world is addicted to fixing. We call it optimization. We call it hustle. We call it healing. But most of it is just avoidance wrapped in productivity. A way to stay busy while never coming home to yourself. We've normalized numbness. We've glorified emotional suppression. We've turned being unbothered into a badge of honor, when really it's often a symptom of unhealed trauma. So let me ask you, what are you actually avoiding? Don't give me the surface answer. Don't tell me you just want to do better or be more focused. That's the performance talking. That's the persona you've built to survive. I'm asking, what part of you hasn't been allowed to speak? What pain are you keeping locked in the basement of your mind, hoping it'll go away if you keep the door shut tight enough? Because that pain isn't going anywhere. It's running your life from the shadows. And until you're brave enough to feel it, you'll keep fixing symptoms. You'll keep tweaking the outside while the inside remains untouched. You'll keep wondering why nothing feels like enough. Why peace never lasts. Why silence feels suffocating. But silence isn't the enemy. It's the mirror. And when you finally stop filling the space with strategy and start listening, you'll hear what your soul has been trying to say for years. I'm still here. I never left. You just stopped feeling me. This is where the healing begins. Not in the strategy, but in the surrender. Not in the performance, but in the presence. You don't need more habits. You need more honesty. You don't need another schedule. You need a moment of stillness so raw it scares you. Because the real you, the one that's alive underneath the armor, isn't asking you to be more disciplined. It's asking you to be more real, more willing to feel the grief, to name the resentment, to cry without apology, to admit that sometimes you're not okay, and that's not failure. That's freedom. That's the paradox the Stoics understood. Freedom is found not in controlling the world, but in facing the parts of ourselves we've worked so hard to hide. Not with judgment, with compassion. Because behind every fear is a need that hasn't been met. And behind every symptom is a truth you haven't dared to feel. So don't run from the symptom. Trace it, follow it. Let it lead you back to the place where your real healing lives, the moment you stop feeling and the part of you that still wants to. That's where we begin. That's where we return. Because you're not too emotional. You're emotionally exiled. And it's time to come home. There's a moment, and you've probably felt it. That split second after you distract yourself, after the scroll, the snack, the silence-breaking noise, when it's all quiet again and the emptiness rushes back in. That hollow ache, that vague but sharp awareness that despite all your effort, you're still carrying something you can't name. That's not laziness. That's not lack of ambition. That's the cost of emotional avoidance. And the most painful part is you've built a life that looks full from the outside. You've read the books, checked the boxes, played the role. You've crafted a life of competence, but something in you still feels unclaimed, unanchored. You move forward, but it doesn't feel like growth. You achieve, but it doesn't feel like victory, because the part of you that's driving it all is still afraid to stop and feel what's underneath. You've been conditioned to fix instead of feel. And that's the tragedy of modern resilience, that we confuse numbness with strength, that we label emotional expression as drama, that we label needing connection as weakness. So we stay silent, even when our soul is screaming. We build routines around our symptoms instead of relationships with our wounds. We become masters at functioning while fragmented. But functioning isn't the same as living. Living requires intimacy. With reality, with emotion, with truth. And the truth is, your symptoms are not problems. They're portals to the very feelings you've spent your life trying to outrun. Carl Jung said neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. That's not a poetic phrase, it's a roadmap. It means what we call anxiety, procrastination, burnout. These are not enemies, they're signals. Clues that point back to a suffering you never let yourself have, a grief you never allowed, a fear you tried to outwork. You didn't heal, you just rerouted the pain into something more socially acceptable, more productive, more performative. But you can only reroute for so long before the soul starts calling your bluff. This is the inner war you're really fighting, not with the world, with the part of you that knows exactly what you've been avoiding. That part of you that notices when your voice shakes every time you talk about your childhood. That notices the sting when someone leaves you on read and how fast your brain spirals to rejection. That part that's painfully aware that you always feel like you're too much or not enough, never just right. These aren't surface-level glitches. They're emotional bookmarks, placed in moments you've never dared to fully read. You can't heal what you won't feel, and you can't grow past what you're still pretending isn't there. That's why Stoicism isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about facing it, holding it in the light, and seeing it for what it really is. Not a threat, not a flaw, but a mirror, a messenger, a path. Marcus Aurelius didn't say ignore your emotions. He said don't be controlled by them. Epictetus didn't teach us to harden. He taught us to align our perception with reality. And the reality is, until you feel, you will never truly see. So stop apologizing for your sensitivity. That sensitivity is your radar. It's the soul's early warning system that something is out of alignment. But sensitivity without honesty becomes shame. And that shame gets buried, encoded into habits you call just how I am. But you're not your patterns. You're not your coping. You're not your emotional armor. You are the one beneath all of it. And that one, the real you, has been waiting. Not for more motivation, not for more strategy, but for permission. Permission to feel, to grieve, to be angry, to say no, to not be okay, to crack open. Because only when you crack open can the light actually touch the places you've been hiding. But I know that's terrifying. To sit in the room with your pain without reaching for the exit. To look it in the eye without flinching. That's the discipline no one talks about. The quiet, private, sacred work of holding space for your own darkness without needing to fix it. Just feel it. To let it pass through you instead of building your life around avoiding it. Psychology calls this emotional integration. Philosophy calls it alignment. Stoicism calls it virtue. It's not about control. It's about clarity. The clarity to know that what you're feeling is not a problem to solve. It's a truth to meet. And the sooner you meet it, the sooner you return to wholeness. Wholeness isn't perfection. Wholeness is when every part of you has a voice, even the broken ones, even the angry ones, even the parts you were told were unlovable. They don't need to disappear. They need to be seen, heard, held, because the opposite of emotional suppression isn't emotional chaos. It's emotional honesty, and in a world that trains you to edit your feelings, to smile through pain, to keep it all together, that honesty is radical. And it's also where peace begins. Not the surface-level peace of looking calm while dying inside. The deep, grounded peace of knowing you've stopped running, that you've stopped lying to yourself, that you finally let your soul breathe. But let's not romanticize it. It's not graceful, it's not clean, it's messy, ugly, raw. You'll cry for reasons you can't name. You'll grieve things that happened years ago. You'll feel rage and confusion and heartbreak. But you'll also feel lightness. You'll feel clarity. You'll feel alive again. And isn't that what you came here for? Not to fix what's wrong with you, but to reclaim what's real. You are not a machine. You are not a productivity system. You are not a brand. You are a human being, designed to feel. And that feeling isn't your flaw. It's your compass. You don't heal by fixing the symptom. You heal by listening to what the symptom is trying to say. That anxiety isn't asking for more control. It's asking for more safety. That burnout isn't a sign of laziness. It's a sign of misalignment. The numbness isn't absence of feeling. It's the body's cry for reconnection. So stop diagnosing yourself as broken and start asking better questions. What am I avoiding? What am I pretending doesn't hurt? Where did I stop trusting myself? Because those questions, they're not distractions from your goals. They are the doorway to the only goal that matters, wholeness. And when you walk through that door, something incredible happens. You stop fighting yourself. You stop fearing your emotions. You stop seeking permission to exist. And you start living, not from fear, not from performance, but from truth. You stop fixing the symptom because you've remembered something deeper. The root was never brokenness. The root was always your fear of feeling, and now, finally, you're facing it. This is the moment where everything starts to change. By now, you've probably started noticing it, that quiet tension underneath everything, the hum of unease that never fully goes away. You've built, achieved, survived, even healed in some ways, and yet that disconnection still lingers. That ache beneath the productivity, that emotional residue that clings to even your best days. You've cleaned the windows, but the room still feels dark. You've silenced the symptoms, but the root is still pulsing, because you've never sat with it long enough to hear what it's been trying to say. We were never taught to feel. Not really. We were taught to react. We were taught to suppress, to regulate, to behave. But no one sat down and told us that sadness doesn't mean you're broken. That anger doesn't mean you're bad. That shame doesn't mean you're worthless. And so we grew up believing that emotions were problems to be solved, signals of failure, proof that something was wrong with us. So we medicated with distraction. We self-soothed with ambition. We learned to perform wellness. We replaced depth with dopamine. And it worked until it didn't. Because no matter how perfectly you patch the cracks, the foundation still knows what's underneath. And here's the thing about emotional avoidance. It doesn't just numb pain. It numbs joy, too. You can't selectively shut off emotion. You can't lock grief in the basement without silencing gratitude. You can't numb anger without blurring your ability to feel wonder. The wall you built to protect yourself became a cage. And now you can't tell if you're safe or just emotionally sedated. That's why Stoicism isn't about becoming emotionless. It's about developing emotional clarity. Marcus Aurelius didn't hide from discomfort. He documented it. He sat with it. He faced it head on, night after night, through every betrayal, every failure, every temptation of ego. Why? Because he understood something we've forgotten. The mind doesn't become strong by avoiding chaos. It becomes strong by becoming familiar with it. Not indulgent, not reactive, but intimate with its patterns. The ancient philosophers, the modern psychologists, they all point to the same unspoken truth. The fear of feeling is what truly enslaves us, not the feeling itself. The moment you believe that anger will destroy you, that sadness will consume you, that grief will break you, that's the moment you become trapped. Not by the emotion, but by your refusal to meet it. Because the irony is, what you avoid controls you, but what you face dissolves. Not instantly, not painlessly, but consistently, layer by layer, fear by fear, breath by breath. And maybe no one ever told you this, so let me say it clearly now. There is nothing wrong with you for feeling deeply. You're not dramatic. You're not too sensitive. You're not weak. You're alive. You're human. You've just spent too long being taught that your softness is a liability instead of a strength. You don't need to fix that part of you. You need to listen to it. What if you stopped running every time it hurts? What if you allowed the tears to fall instead of analyzing them away? What if, for once, you didn't try to manage the pain, but simply allowed it to exist? That's not weakness, that's bravery. Because to sit in your body, fully present, while every instinct screams for escape, that's discipline. Emotional discipline isn't the absence of emotion. It's the courage to feel without collapsing, to allow discomfort without letting it define you, to witness your own suffering and say, I am still here. I am still whole. That's what the Stoics understood. That virtue doesn't mean avoidance. It means alignment with nature, with reality, with your own soul. And reality includes grief. It includes rage. It includes moments of despair. You are not meant to avoid those moments. You are meant to walk through them awake. And when you do, when you stop patching the symptoms and finally let yourself feel the root, you'll discover something unexpected. Your emotions aren't enemies. They're exiled parts of you that have been waiting to return. They're not proof of brokenness. They're the doorway back to integration. Integration means nothing is banished. No emotion is silenced. No part of you is rejected. Even the parts that are scared, petty, shameful, tired, lost. Especially those. Because when you allow them in, when you stop pushing them down, you stop fighting yourself. And in that moment, you stop living fractured. You stop performing a version of healing that looks good on the outside but leaves you hollow within. You stop chasing the next technique, the next routine, the next mental hack to outmaneuver your pain. And you start doing the real work. The slow, quiet, sacred work of being with what is. Because that's the shift. The moment the war with yourself ends. Not because the pain disappears, but because your resistance to it does. That's when healing begins. When you say to the pain, "You can stay. I'm not afraid of you anymore." When you look at your old coping and say, "I see why you were necessary, but you're not in charge anymore." When you breathe through the ache instead of running from it and realize, the storm is inside you, but so is the anchor. That's the moment you become powerful. Not because you've fixed everything, but because you've stopped needing to. Because you've remembered, the root was never the sadness. The root was your fear of feeling it. And now, you're not afraid anymore. By now, maybe you're starting to understand something that was never obvious on the surface. It's not your circumstances that broke you. It's the way you abandoned yourself to survive them. It's not the sadness that crushed you. It's the silence you were forced to live in afterward. The absence of space to feel it fully. The pressure to be okay. The quiet demand to move on. To look strong. To hold it together while bleeding inside. That's the fracture. That's the real wound. Not the pain itself, but the disconnection from your right to feel it. And when you forget how to feel, you forget how to live. You become efficient, productive, high-functioning, but hollow. People admire your discipline, your work ethic, your ability to get through anything. But they don't see the toll it took to become that version of yourself. They don't see the parts you buried to earn their applause. They don't see the nights you couldn't sleep because your nervous system was still fighting a war your mind pretended didn't exist. You learned to fix symptoms, restlessness, overthinking, fatigue, burnout, not because you were lazy, but because that's all the world ever handed you. Tools for the surface, hacks for the mask. But no one taught you how to hold yourself in the dark, how to sit in a room with your grief and say nothing. Just breathe, just listen, just exist. And that's what this script has been about. Not perfection, not fixing, but remembering. Remembering that healing isn't sterile, growth isn't linear, and peace doesn't always feel peaceful at first. Because when you start feeling again, really feeling, it's not gentle, it's raw, it's messy, it's waves of emotion you can't control, it's memories surfacing at strange times, it's laughing and crying in the same breath, it's joy and rage and grief and awe all moving through you like weather. And your job isn't to manage the weather, it's to become the sky, vast enough to hold it all. That's what the Stoics meant by fortitude. That's what Marcus Aurelius did in his most personal writings, not suppress his emotion, but stare into it with full presence. Examine it, question it, and then return to stillness. Not because the storm was over, but because he had anchored himself inside it. The Stoics didn't fear emotion, they feared enslavement. Enslavement to reaction, to unconscious impulse, to unexamined fear. But emotion itself, emotion is information. Emotion is guidance. Emotion is life. It's the unspoken language of the soul. And when you stop running from it, when you stop treating your feelings like enemies, you become fluent in that language again. You stop just surviving and you start participating. You stop numbing and you start creating. You stop pretending and you start living. So yes, you fixed the symptoms. You've done the routines. You've read the books, watched the videos, practiced the techniques. And that was necessary. That was sacred. That was your bridge. But the next part of your journey is not about optimization. It's about reclamation. Reclaiming the parts of you that got left behind in the trauma. Reclaiming the child in you that was never allowed to cry without being punished. Reclaiming the artist in you that buried their passion under practicality. Reclaiming the human in you that forgot what it means to feel without shame. That's the root. That's the fire you've been circling. That's the wound you've been tiptoeing around, hoping it would disappear on its own. But now you know. It's not going anywhere until you sit down beside it. And when you do, when you finally allow yourself to feel without fleeing, you'll see it differently. You'll see that your pain wasn't there to punish you. It was there to wake you up to the truth, to your values, to the fact that every time you silence your emotions, you betray your soul. And every time you honor them, even for a moment, you come home. That home isn't built in a day. It's built every time you choose presence over avoidance, stillness over scrolling, honesty over performance. Every time you stop fixing and start feeling, you rebuild that foundation. And one day, not with a bang, not with fireworks, but in a quiet moment, you'll notice something different. A calm, a clarity, a peace not based on perfection, but on wholeness. You'll start responding to life instead of reacting. You'll start choosing alignment over approval. You'll stop fearing your feelings because you'll know they can't break you anymore. Because you've felt the worst of them, and you're still here. Because you've sat in your sadness, your rage, your shame, and you didn't die. You didn't collapse. You didn't disappear. You emerged, more integrated, more awake, more human. And now you walk differently. You speak differently. You don't need to prove or perform or pretend anymore, because you know who you are, not in theory, not in concept, but in blood, in breath, in bone. You are not someone fixing symptoms anymore. You are someone who faced the root and survived. And that changes everything. Because once you've felt the truth, you can't unfeel it. Once you've lived from your soul, you can't go back to just surviving. Once you've held yourself in the dark, you don't fear the dark anymore. That's not healing, that's freedom. And that's the invitation this moment is giving you. Not to run, not to fix, not to numb, but to feel it all. To stop fearing the depth of your own humanity and start honoring it. That's what your peace depends on. Not more control, more feeling. Not more strategy, more surrender. Not more masks, more truth. And if you accept that, if you choose that path, then this isn't the end of your journey. It's the beginning of your return, the beginning of your real life. Welcome home. You're not broken. You're just remembering how to feel. And from here forward, everything changes. This is pure Stoic life, and this is your return. Now go live it.